Hey guys, welcome to week 5 with studying about the bones. Again, I hope all of your weeks have gone well. I've heard from some of you, and I'm excited to see all the great work you're doing on your own and through this flexible or flex class. We're going to talk a little about flexibility today with our bones and with cartilage, so buckle up. Let's get ready to explore the world of bones, okay? Bones, first of all, if this was a live class, you could play this with your sibling or mom and dad and see if you can tell the difference between invertebrate or vertebrate. So the main difference between those two things is that animals and humans that have an internal skeleton made up of bones are vertebrates. So anything that has bone is going to be known as a vertebrate. We get that name because each individual part of our backbone are called vertebrae. And so we get the word vertebrate from the word, talking about our backbone. And so all fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals are vertebrates, but that only makes up about 2% of the world. So that's only a very, very few or very little of what is made up as far as living things that are animals in our world. Animals without a backbone are called invertebrates. And so normally these things, if they're insects, most insects will have what they call an exoskeleton, which is a harder outer covering that will protect their insides. Just like we have bones, our bones end up protecting our organs, our vital organs. The same thing with our bones as well. We protect it with our vital organs, just like the exoskeleton for them. That's why when you sometimes step on a beetle, you might hear this crunch sound, and that is actually that exoskeleton breaking. Earthworms don't have that, but earthworms are also kind of on their own to themselves underground, but they're also an example of an invertebrate, which is why you see them wiggling and not being able to kind of keep their shape, if that makes sense. Like they stay in the same shape, but they can't control some of their movements with their bones. So 98% of all animals are invertebrates, so they do not have a backbone or a skeleton. However, snakes, this is a common misconception, snakes are reptiles, and so they are vertebrates. A lot of people ask me about that, and they get that confused because snakes have in their bones, they have a lot of cartilage, which is a very, very flexible connective tissue. So they're able to move and slither, which kind of makes the same motion as almost like earthworms. However, earthworms do not have of any type of bones, okay? So just because they can slither does not mean that they are an invertebrate or an invertebrate. So think about, whether it has bones or not, and even cartilage, which can make it more flexible than without having to have no bones at all. So challenge your parents, or challenge your brother and sister, see if you can see who can get the most points and knock each other's ship off. As a pirate game that is attached. And if you just want to do it by yourself, just to check, make sure you understand which animals are vertebrates, which animals are invertebrates. That's a good review for y'all, okay? What do bones do? So we already talked about one thing, that they protect our organs from damage, but another thing is that bones make your blood cells. So think about when we talk about red blood cells, the circulatory system, they actually give rise to those red blood cells. So our bone actually has blood vessels in them that produce that blood in the bone marrow and then take it out into our bloodstream. It also produces things like stem cells and things like that as well. Bones allow you to move. That's the most common thing we think about with bones, is our movement and what we're able to do with those. We have a division of our skeleton into two parts. One is called an axial skeleton, which is basically all the parts of your skeleton that protect your organs. So it's at the center, it's centered around the midline or the middle of your body, and consists of backbone, which is protecting your spinal cord, your sternum, which is protecting your heart, and your part of your lungs, mostly your heart. Your ribs are protecting both sets of lungs from the respiratory system, and your skull is protecting your brain. So all those things are protecting the different major organs of your body. Your appendicular skeleton, which is the one that's tan, like our normal bones, the axial skeleton is the blue. The appendicular are the ones that are like our limbs, the ones that we're going to be using for movement. So that's your arms and your legs, and you're going to use those again to move around. You're not going to have to necessarily use this to protect vital organs. So if something happens to your arm, it's not going to damage anything besides just the bone in your arm and maybe your muscle or ligaments and things like that, but not something that is going to be vital to your functioning. Again, bones have to be lightweight in order for us to be able to move around easily, but strong enough so they will not break easily. So I kind of compare this to two extremes. Lightweight, think about paper. If you have a piece of paper, you're going to be able to move it, and like after you move it a while, it will end up tearing. And we don't want our bones to tear and break, so we don't want them to be super light. Also, they would be so light that we might end up flying off because it makes 15% of our body. So body's weight, adults' body's weight. So we want it to be light enough to where we can move around, but we also want them to be strong enough so they won't break. You don't want them to be so strong that you're like 10-man or robot moving around and not being able to have any flexibility. You don't want to be so rigid so that they will not break. Think about putting like a metal rod where all your bones are, and see how that would make it feel almost very rigid and robot-like versus being able to be flexible. Again, bones make up 15% of the adult's body weight, and it's also producing our blood. They have different layers. The outer layer is really thin, but it also has a tough layer called the periosteum, and that has blood vessels running through it that allow blood to enter the bone and exit the bone. The next layer is compact, which is a hard white part of your bone. And then underneath the compact bone is a network of thin pieces of bone, which is called spongy bone. Another part of the inside of the bone is called your bone marrow. And again, this is where your special cells, your stem cells are made. And also it gives rise to our red blood cells, which is a vital part of one of the three major parts of our blood: red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Sorry, I forgot to mention this on the second slide. There is a video here. Again, watch at your own pace. What I would do if I were you is to listen and then pause when there's a video and watch the video, or you can do all the videos at the end. I think they connect with what I'm talking about, so it'd be easier for you to do that. So to listen, pause, watch the video, listen, pause, watch the video. So that way you're seeing how they're all connected together, how all the information kind of joins together. Not quite bone. So cartilage is a tough connective tissue. We have cartilage in different parts of our bone. We have cartilage in our nose, which makes our nose a little bit bendable. We also have cartilage in the top of our ear, which makes it a little bit bendable, which is why people sometimes get cartilage piercings, which I don't recommend, but people do because it's not bone. It's actually flexible connective tissue. We have cartilage in our knee that connects our femur to our tibia. We also have cartilage basically at all of our bendable joints, such as your rib cages. It also connects your rib cages to your breastbone, which is your sternum. Cartilage, though, in babies actually turns into hard bone. When babies are born, they have about 300 bones, and through the process called ossification, they end up hardening and forming into larger bones. For example, their skull. If you see a baby, their skull, there's actually a little soft spot where their skull is not actually fused together yet. And that's because their brain is not done growing. So if it was actually fused, then the skull would have to grow with the brain. However, it does do that, but it gives the skull room to grow, and then it will fuse together once they're done growing. So that has cartilage in it because it has to be a little bit more flexible. People who are older can also go through the process of ossification, especially in their joints like their knee, because the cartilage will end up hardening and turning into bone, and then they won't be able to move that joint as well. And that's why you see a lot of elderly people who have a hard time moving and getting around, is because sometimes their bones end up ossifying and hardening. So, or not their bones, but their cartilage, and that turns into bone, which is why they have a hard time moving. There's also rings of trachea that are in your cartilage, which you can feel in your neck. And those are actually making sure that your trachea is open, so that you're not, your airway, one pathway to your lungs won't close unless, you know, something majorly with your medically happens, like you go into shock and need an EpiPen, things like that. If you're allergic to different things like bees or peanuts, most of the time your trachea is going to stay open because of that cartilage. Again, here's a lovely video you can watch about that as well if you want to see the different types of cartilage and the cartilage in action. We also have joints, which are the place where your bones come together and help you move. The different joints allow your body to do different types of movements. So you have 4 major types of joints. The first one is ball and socket. These are what are connecting your arms to your shoulder and your leg to your hip. The bone actually of your arm or leg ends in a knob, and then it's actually in a bowl, that shape socket that fits into it, which is why you probably hear people who are athletes or even gymnasts who are using their arms and shoulders they say they popped something out of socket, they popped their bone out of socket, which can happen because it literally can pop out and you can pop it back in. It's painful, but you can. This setup lets you rotate your arm or leg in different directions, which is why you can almost do it like in a 360. You can move it all the way around versus just one back and forth direction. You can rotate them. Your hinge joint is like your elbow back and forth, or your knee back and forth. However, it's similar to a hinge of a door. You can't open your door all the way to the back and all the way to the front. You only can go one direction, and that's the same thing with your elbow. Like, I can stretch my elbow out like this, but I cannot bend my elbow back this way. It only goes one way. It goes up, not down. My knee goes back, not forward. Or like flipping you'll flip your foot and hit your face. So think about that as well. You only can go one direction, which is back and forth, up and down, but only one way. Your saddle is like your thumb. It's actually meeting your hand bone, and this kind of a joint allows your thumb to move forward, backward, side to side, and to grab onto things. I think of it like a joystick, like you play on like a video game. It lets you rotate it. Because the saddles of your joint is actually crisscross, giving you ample movement, which is why you're able to move and grab things with your thumb. Pivot is like your neck. You can go back and forth, and you can go up and down, but you're not able to turn your neck completely 180 all the way around. The only animal that I know that can do that is the owl, and that's because that's like kind of a special adaptation that it has to be able to see its predators that are going to attack it. We have awesome vision. Unlike the owl's vision is very, like, if you think about putting your hands like this, you can't see anything but what's straight in front of you. That vision on the side is blocked. If you actually sat and looked from right to left, you can see what's all the way around you, except and then you can turn your neck and pivot it to see what's behind you. The owl's necks can actually turn all the way around. So we don't necessarily need that, our neck to turn all the way around, because we have that vision that's going to help us. And here's some examples. Here's your head of your femur for your ball and socket, and it's fitting into that hip bone. It reminds me of like a mortar and pestle that you make like guacamole or you grind spices in, and that's literally how it will rotate into your movement for that joint. Hinge, here's your femur, which is the strongest bone in your body, and here's your tibia. Your knee is literally made out of cartilage, and it is doing the flexing and extending. Which is why, again, if that cartilage hardens, you're going to have trouble moving, because that's the one thing that's actually keeping your leg. It's like the metal piece of that hinge that is keeping that hinge moving back and forth. which is why you hear a lot of people who are elderly have total knee replacements. Quick sad story. My mom had a total knee replacement, and they used a plastic device to kind of put as her knee. It's not called an appliance. And the doctor put it in there. He ended up breaking a bone in her leg. He said he fixed it, not a big deal. She could go to physical therapy and get some strength, because basically once you get your total knee done, you have to start moving it right away or it will stiffen, and then you're not going to have that range of motion because it's a hinge. So think about if you let it just sit there and you don't move it, you're not going to have a good range of motion being able to bend it back and forth. So she went to PT, was fine. She ended up going to sit down and not even doing physical therapy, just sit down. And she ended up breaking her femur all the way up. And we're going to talk about breaks in a second. And this one wasn't like a normal break. It was called a spiral fracture. And I'll bring that back up again when we talk about fractures, because it's very rare that you can break your femur, which is the strongest bone in your body, the way that she did. And I'll bring that back up. So I want to mention about the knee, because the knee is important because it's connecting those two bones. You also have a saddle joint. This, again, looks like that cross saddle, and it's sitting right there where you have a radius. Here's your ulna, here's your trapezium, and your metacarpal of your thumb. So you have different bones in your wrist and in your thumb that is going, mostly your thumb, is going to have that saddle. And then your pivot, it literally has like something holding it and letting it move side to side. That center part right here is literally what's giving it its movement to be able to move it side to side. Standing up straight. So this is really cool about our backbone, because it is literally protecting our spinal cord, which is basically the roadway to delivering those neural messages from your brain. And you need that because it's connected to all your nerves. So you don't want your protection to pinch the roadway that is taking all your messages. And that can happen. Your backbone or spine is made up of these chain bones called vertebrae, and the vertebrae protect your spinal cord and support your weight. So literally sometimes people have back problems, and sometimes it's because of how they have the weight positioned, or they might have something called scoliosis, which is like a curvature of your back. Your back is naturally curved, but it can be curving the wrong way in the wrong direction, which can cause back discomfort. A lot of times people go to the chiropractor to get adjusted to get their back in the right type of an alignment. And I've had that happen to me. Like after I had my little girl, my back was really bad, and I have scoliosis, so I had to have it adjusted to get it fixed so that I don't have as much back pain. Your first 7 is actually called your cervical vertebrae, and that is going to be supporting your neck and your head. Literally your first cervical, you can actually feel the back of your head go down, and there's like a little groove. That little groove is the start of your first vertebrae. That's like the ending of your skull, starting of your first cervical vertebrae. I've had that one adjusted, and it kind of feels weird because it's actually almost like on your skull, and it's not. It's actually the first one down from your skull. You have the thoracic vertebrae, which is the next 12, which you can see right here. And there's 12 of them, and they're each connected to a rib because you have 12 ribs in all. You have 6 on each side. And so they're connected to those. The next one are your lumbar. They're your thickest and longest because they support your weight. Most of your weight, where all your organs, where your stomach, where you carry the most weight, is actually your mid-line or mid-area, just because that's where all your organs are. Besides your legs and besides your arms, everything's going to be in your midline. And that's why they have to be longer and thicker to be able to support that, so that you're not off balance and off kilter. The next one is your sacrum. That is triangular shape. That's the only one that's not the typical vertebrae shape, which is, you can actually see here. It's very unique how they're shaped. And then the last part is your coccyx, which is your tailbone. And that's the last part of your backbone, which literally sits almost right on your rear end. People can break this bone. It is possible to break your vertebrae or break your tailbone, just like you can break any other arm, leg, appendage that you use, collarbone, things like that. You can break it. I hope not any of you have broken any bones, but if you have, I understand your pain. I've broken one bone and it really wasn't that bad, but I've seen family members who, again, my mom broke her femur and it was a long road to recovery just because of how her break was. So I hope that never happened to you, but if it has, I know you probably can relate to this. My sister also broke her tailbone sliding on what they call a sliding rock, and she hit it really hard and had to, they don't put a cast on it. Think about if you had a cast around your waist and your rear end where your tailbone was ending, and that would just look kind of funny and you'd be walking weird, and it's not practical. And so some things like that do not have a cast. They actually heal on their own. Your bones naturally heal on their own. And she basically just had to send a donut hole so she would not have any pain until it healed. All right, again, another great video for you to watch to get some more information if you choose to do so. So bones have different shapes because they have different purposes. Think about your arm and what it does versus your wrist, and your flat bone, your sternum, versus your vertebrae, which is an irregular shaped bone, versus your flat bone like your skull. They all have different purposes. I mean, your long bones are normally used for movement. Your short bones, again, are used for movement in a different way. The flat bone for your skull and for your sternum are used for protection, and your irregular vertebrae are used for protection as well, and also for movement. So they're kind of used for both for that one. Some people think that teeth are actually bones, but they're not. That is a common myth. Your bones are of a different material than your teeth. Your teeth are actually stronger than your bones. They're made out of a material called enamel, which is the strongest stuff in your body and is supposed to be indestructible. People think it can be indestructible, but obviously it's not, because we wouldn't have cavities and things like that if our enamel was indestructible. But it's because of where it's located in our body that it has natural bacteria from your saliva and also sugar. You also have natural bacteria because you put food in your mouth, which is made of different nutrients, different bacteria, different things that are going to break down that enamel, which can cause a cavity, which is a hole in your tooth. Underneath the enamel is a yellow bone-like material called dentin, and that dentin, again, is right before you get to the pulp. So you really don't want your cavity getting all the way to your dentin or even into your pulp, because your pulp contains all your blood vessels and your nerves. So if you have that cavity eaten away and it finally gets here, you're going to have something worse than a cavity. You're going to have a root canal, which is going to take that whole tooth out, because it's going to be sending these messages to your brain that your tooth's in pain. And we don't want that, because it literally would be, because you just decayed your tooth. When the dentist checks your teeth and they say, I see the crown of your tooth, the crown just means that it's the visible part, because most of your tooth is actually underneath your gum line. And it's actually attached to your jaws by roots. And they are covered by a bony substance called cementum. Think about cement. If someone puts cement down, it ends up hardening and like making sidewalks and things like that. The cement or the cementum in your mouth is actually what's holding your teeth in place, so that you're not randomly losing your teeth. The only time you will lose your teeth is when you're losing your baby teeth, and that's because new teeth are growing up underneath it. Another reason you might lose your teeth is because when you get older, sometimes your cementum wears and it literally will make your teeth fall out, which is why you see a lot of older people have dentures. Or sometimes we knock our teeth out by accidents. I know my Mima, my grandma, ended up having to have what they call a partial denture, because she ended up knocking the bottom two of her incisors out during an accident, and she has it's like just two teeth that she can put in her mouth as dentures, and that's common as well. So again, Those are not teeth, but I want to include this because that's a typical myth or misconception people have about your teeth. All right, a few more things to talk about, guys. We have ligaments. Bones are actually not fastened firmly to each other. And so in order for them to not kind of like slip and slide, and float around, they have to be secure, and that's because they have these ligaments. They're actually elastic. They're almost like a rubber band, if you think about that. And they're fibrous, so think about almost like a yarn that's really, really stretchy. It has all these little fibers in it. And so it only stretches slightly. It's not like as flexible as a rubber band. When you stretch before exercising, you're actually making your body more flexible by stretching your ligaments and preparing for action. So if you are an athlete or you dance, you normally want to stretch beforehand, so you're making yourself more flexible to be able to move those bones and those muscles in ways that you need to. Some people have taught me when we talk about joints about being double jointed before. Double jointed is not really a true thing. You do not have two joints, but you actually have really, really flexible ligaments, which makes your body contort in different ways that are unusual to us normally. So they have very flexible ligaments, and that's where you get that kind of term double jointed, because of how they are able to bend and move their body or their bones into different positions. Going back to breaks, we talked about how my mom broke her femur. If you look at this picture, this is actually a good, just like one break. And that is, again, called a fracture. It's, our bones are very strong. Again, they're strong enough to not break easily, but they're also light enough for us to move. So sometimes accidents happen. We might fall and we might break a bone. Doctors normally take an x-ray because they need to know where that break is exactly and how that break is, whether that is like a straight on break or what they call a spiral fracture. And there's different types of fractures. So this one, I'm going to actually draw a picture of a spiral fracture. So here is how my mom's leg broke. So here's her leg. That's her bone. Her bone ended up spiraling, like literally breaking in several places to where they couldn't just put it together and put a cast on it. They literally had to put plates and screws to hold her leg into place and let it heal. And it took her months for it to heal. So she was on not weight bearing for about 8 months, which means she couldn't put any weight on that leg until it healed, because if she did, all her weight would have been on that femur, which is why that femur is that strongest bone, and it would have rebroken, and then she wouldn't have like any bone that would be salvageable to fix. So that's, again, super important to know that your doctor is taking an x-ray, know how they need to fix the bone. Most of the time it's not surgery. Most of the time it's just one clean cut break. And it's normally not that bad, but if it is, they need to know if they need to do surgery, where it's at, they need pins and screws, if they just need to align it outwardly with your body and then put a cast on. That gives them kind of their game plan, what they need to do. If a bone is broken, the doctor will line up the broken parts of the bone the right way and then put a cast on the injured part of the bone to keep it from moving around. If you do not do that and you broke a bone, number one, that would be painful, but number two, your bones naturally heal, and it's almost like breaking a plate and then putting the pieces back together, and then it magically comes back. If you don't put those pieces back together, then it's not going to heal and mend itself. It's actually going to do it crooked. And you don't want a crooked femur. You don't want a crooked tibia or fibia. You want to make sure that your bone is aligning straight so that it's not enabling you or inhibiting you from walking correctly or doing whatever correctly. So the broken bone and tissue normally bleeds and clots, just like when we scrape our knee. And then after a couple of days, the blood will carry a component that will lay down a mesh like our platelets do and weave a new bone of material. And that's called lamellar bone that will eventually grow over the woven bone and make it stronger so that you can still be able to walk on it and do whatever. It's not going to make it as weak as if it didn't have that lamellar bone. And the younger you are, the faster your bones will heal. Calcium helps your bones harden and heal from any fractures. So keep that in mind. This is an amazing video about cast, and even has some great facts about like different bones and why we can't have casts in them and things like that, depending on where your break is. So check that video out. It's awesome. So your activity this week is actually a flexible spine, and I'll post that video up of how to do that. But also last week you did a muscle, you made a muscular hand where you got to pull and do almost like what I call a robotic hand. As you pull that string down and you're actually pulling that muscle that's controlling that bone. Just like you have the tendons connecting your muscle to your bone. When you move each of those fingers, you're actually moving the muscle, which is then moving that bone, which is why I did that experiment last week. So if you want to see literally what those are called in your hand, if you want to look at the bones that you made with the muscles, here are what we normally call them, the phalanges, metacarpals, and carpals, and then what we typically call them, like to identify each finger: thumb, index, middle, ring, and pinky, or little. There's also a great kind of interactive video that will help you remember the different parts of our bone. All right, guys, I will post the flexible spine video, and hopefully you will be able to complete that. And if you do have any questions or you do not have the materials, please let me know. I would like to find an alternative activity for you to do so that you are successful and you understand every part of our body as we are studying the human body in this course. I hope y'all have a great week. It's a lot of rest, learn a lot, and I'll see you next week.